everybody, my name is Kate Wexell, and I am the founder of the Compass College Consulting. So let's break it down. Today, we're going to talk about one of our least favorite parts of the college application process, which is asking people to write you a letter of recommendation. So why is this most people's least favorite part, aside from writing all of the essays and, like actually paying for the applications? It's because you have to go up to people that you have no idea whether they like you or not and ask them to write in an anonymous format what they think of you, and you never get to read it. Okay, I know that sounds super intimidating, but actually letters of recommendation are not required by most colleges. On the Common Application, usually you can submit up to 3 letters of recommendation for a school, even if they don't require it at all. So I would recommend looking to see, does a school require the letter of recommendation first? And then start asking people once you've finalized your college list. However, a good rule of thumb is to ask about 3 people. So most colleges will require, if they require a letter at all, 1 academic recommender at the minimum. So what that means is that you have to ask one of your high school teachers if they would be willing to write you a letter. Now, who should you be choosing with this? Think about which teachers liked you the most, which classes did you perform the best in, was there a teacher that supervised a club or a sport that you were involved with? Was there a teacher that taught you in a really, really small class where they got to interact with you a lot? All of these people would be great candidates. You can also think of the major that you're going into in college and ask the teacher who taught the class that was most correlated with that major. Right? So if I were studying chemistry in college, I would probably be asking my honors chemistry teacher for a letter of recommendation. When I was going into college, I first thought that I wanted to study either journalism or creative writing. And so one of the teachers that I asked for a letter of recommendation was my literature teacher, who had taught me for multiple years in literature class. And she was really able to speak to my writing ability and my ability to analyze literature, which would be important things for 2 majors that are very, very heavily focused on writing. So the next person that you should be thinking of is, if you have had a job or an internship, think about getting a letter of recommendation from that person, right? And they would really be able to speak to your character and your work ethic, which are 2 important things to make sure that you're able to succeed in college. And then the third person that you should be asking is somebody who maybe knows you on a more personal level. And so that could be somebody who has overseen your volunteer work. That could be somebody who has overseen you in a club activity or an extracurricular. So for example, I asked my pastor because I had been very involved in my church growing up, playing in our praise band and then delivering sermons and volunteering at different events. So he was really able to talk about another facet of me that you don't really get from that academic or work environment, because at the end of the day, colleges are also looking to see that you're a good human being who will get along with the other students that are at your college or university. And so what if you don't have people in some of those categories? Well, for each person that you don't have, that, like if you've never had a job or an internship, if you don't do volunteer work, you can just substitute that with other teachers. Now, who should you not be asking for a letter of recommendation? If you know somebody famous somehow, or like some politician, or just somebody who is important in the community, but they don't know you at all, you should not be asking them. Only if they actually are aware of who you are and they have something genuine to say about you should you be asking them for a letter. The second type of person that you should not be asking is somebody who just doesn't like you. So even if you're thinking like, oh, I'm studying chemistry and my chemistry teacher could write me a letter of recommendation, think about like, did you guys get along? If you guys didn't get along, it's better to just not use that person at all and to think of a subject that was completely unrelated to your major and get it from somebody who liked you in class. And then the third thing is, you cannot ask your family or friends. So even if your best friend thinks that they could get away with saying like, oh, they'll never find out, they don't know who I am, just don't try it. Most letter of recommendations on online portals will ask for the person to insert all of their information for contact, and sometimes schools will actually follow up with those recommenders to find out how legitimate they were. So no, just because your boyfriend has a completely different last name from you, it doesn't mean that he can write you a letter of recommendation without people finding out. This should also apply to close family friends, unless there's something legitimate that they can contribute to either your academics, your work experience, or your involvement in the community. They should not be writing you a letter either. So family friends who would be appropriate are if they oversaw you in an activity, or if they really, really helped you with a passion project of yours, where they could actually directly see how motivated you were and how you were behaving in either a group environment or on working on the project just for yourself. Now, how do you actually ask somebody for a letter of recommendation? There is a good way to go about this and a bad way to go about this. The bad way to go about this is just by sending them an email saying, hey, I'm applying to college. Write me a letter. Like, no. What you should be doing is scheduling a meeting with somebody or actually taking time to go talk to them in person and say, hey, you have been very influential in my life. I think that you can contribute to my letter of recommendation by telling this specific thing about me in this specific category, and here are the experiences I would like for you to talk about. So I'm going to give you guys an example, not related to me applying to college, but right now I am applying to the Rhodes Scholarship, which is a fellowship for graduate school. And I'm submitting, I forget if it's 6 or 7 letters of recommendation, but for example, each person is contributing a different part of my story. So one person might be talking about their research that I did during my undergraduate degree. One person might be talking about how I helped to lead different programs associated with alleviating poverty. Somebody might be telling about policy work that I did, since that was my major. And somebody might be talking about my writing abilities and how I was able to interact within a global setting. So like each person has a different little piece of the story, so that it's not all just 3 people saying the exact same thing about me, right? And so when you're approaching your letter writer, you want to be respectful. You want to tell them why you think that they would be a good person to write your letter. And then when you're explaining what part of your story you want for them to tell, make sure that you provide them with enough evidence to be able to support that. So what that usually means is that you should give them a resume, or at the very least, a couple paragraphs talking about the specific experiences that you want them to convey. And then potentially showing them some of your essays that you're submitting to colleges so that they don't repeat the things that you've already mentioned. And so why is this important? It's important because in college applications, you're given so little space to tell your story. And so you want for these letters to be an effective way to either verify the things that you've done or add more onto your story that you weren't able to write yourself because of word count restrictions. And so then after you've given them your resume, after you've given them all of the information that they need to be able to write your letter, you should be following up about every 2 weeks to make sure that they are actually remembering to write it, make sure that they have access to the portal to submit it. And then whenever it's time to submit your application, let them know, hey, I submitted, thank you so much, send them an email, and then afterwards, write them a handwritten letter thanking them for writing a letter for you. And they'll be very appreciative of that. And especially if you need a letter of recommendation in the future from them, they will be so much more willing to write that for you. All right, now the next thing that I want to talk about is, when should you be asking people for a letter of recommendation? Well, some colleges will start requiring for your college applications to be due around mid to late October or early November. And so with that, I'm talking about early action and early decision schools, and then the UC system schools. So you really want to start asking people as soon as your senior year of high school starts. So within those first 2 weeks of school, or potentially the first 2 weeks of September at the very latest, you want to make sure that all of your letter writers are secured. And so that will give them enough time to actually think about what to write for you. That will also give them enough time to proofread it. And if they decide to send you a copy, to make sure that you're okay with what they're saying and they've conveyed everything correctly with the right information, that'll give you time as well to look over that draft and make sure that everything is perfect. Also, especially in high school, a lot of teachers will be having multiple students ask them for letters of recommendation. So they're already anticipating this, and that means that it'll take them even longer to write your letter. So the best thing is for you to start early. So just as a recap, let's go over what should you do step by step. So in the first 2 weeks of school, or at the very latest, the first 2 weeks of September, you should be reaching out to 3 people. Preferably, this should be 1 teacher, 1 supervisor for work or an internship, and then 1 person who can speak to your community involvement. If you don't have some of those people, trade them out for teachers who can also speak to your academics. Then, when you're asking them, ask them in person in a polite way. and tell them exactly what you want for them to contribute to your overall story and application. You should then provide them with supplemental materials, which can include your essays, a CV, or a couple of paragraphs talking about why you want them to write this and what specifically you want for them to focus on, and any evidence that you need to support it. After that, you should be following up about every 2 weeks to make sure that they're still working on your letter of recommendation and that they're able to submit it. And then after you've submitted your application, you should be sending them a handwritten thank you card to show them how much you appreciate them doing this for you. Anyway, I hope that you found this helpful. If you want to see more resources, you can take a look at thecompass.online.